Welcome to the Hidden Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove, and today we're going to be talking about being an authentic leader and how to take responsibility and knowing when to apologize. In this episode, we're going to navigate this topic in an authentic way without feeling like you have to apologize for everything. And we're going to break down the essence of taking responsibility and then talk about when you should and when you shouldn't apologize. And we're going to finish by talking about the necessity of being genuine in the midst of mistakes and goals unmet. At the end of this episode, we're going to do 3 takeaways to be able to help you directly apply what we talk about today in your own leadership. And every week we come out with a new episode to be able to help you tap into your hidden potential. We do that by giving you practical and mental tools to be able to help you in your leadership. Let's go ahead and get started with a big thought, and that is one of the hardest parts about becoming a leader is the weight of responsibility that comes with it. It can feel overwhelming to feel like different initiatives or even sometimes the entire organization is relying on you. And it can feel either frustrating or discouraging when you run into problems or failed goals with all of the pressure coming down on you and your identity or your ego, and learning how to identify and how to handle those challenges and situations is something that takes humility and also experiences from lessons learned. And this is an important topic to talk about because it can feel incredibly confusing in the moment when wondering what to do when faced with these different situations. And whether it's addressing someone else as the blame or going through the motions of apologizing, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You have to learn how to assess each situation and critically think about what happened and what should be done next. Let's start off by talking about taking actual responsibility. And as a foundation to what we're going to be talking about, it is our job as leaders to take the responsibility. And that means setting the culture for your team, setting the culture for your organization, and also even teaching your people how to take their own responsibility. You need to do your due diligence when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to correcting, when it comes to training, when it comes to rewarding people. And if your team is making the same mistakes over and over, it's your responsibility to correct the course and show people a level of accountability. You end up hurting good staff and good volunteers when bad ones are left with no responsibility for their actions. So again, this is a part of being a leader that's not always necessarily easy, and that's taking responsibility for the direction of your organization. So often we limit taking responsibility to these individual mistakes, but I think that real responsibility comes when we're recognizing a direction that is unhealthy or a culture that is toxic and taking the responsibility to change the course. It's not just being the blame man, it's taking the responsibility of what to do next. That's key. Now let's talk about the blame and when to take the blame and when not to. See, as a popular quote by John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership, which is incredibly true. But even when we delegate a responsibility to someone else, we are still the ones that stewarded that duty to that person. So everything does, in a sense, flow from top to bottom. But you still have to bring that philosophy down to earth in a reasonable way that considers us as leaders being human. You have to consider our humanity. You have to consider our lack of omniscience. And even while you're trying your best to not make mistakes, mistakes are going to happen. And whether it's on you or whether it's on someone else, it's our job to learn from them and correct the course to move forward. And you should apologize to your team when you feel like you've made an oversight or a genuine mistake. But don't feel the need to apologize for the things that were genuinely out of your control. If there was like a power failure or an unexpected technical issue, you don't have to take the heat for it. And if someone else who dropped the ball entirely made a mistake, you don't have to steal the blame from them. Your team needs to learn how to grow and take responsibility too, if you were to ever want to grow as an organization or grow as a ministry. I feel like this is one that took me a minute to realize. Early on in my leadership, I remember the idea of taking responsibility really hit home to my heart, and I wanted to be a responsible, mature leader. And I often would apologize and take the blame for things that were definitely not my fault. And I remember time and time again, someone else was either being lazy, or they were late, or they were, something happened to where it's clearly, a level of immaturity from someone else. But I would take the blame in whatever way I could. I would say something like, well, you know what? I should have done a better job at making clear of what the expectations were. And it's like some of those things were very obvious and, could have been understood without needing to be said, like show up on time. And yet I was still trying to take the blame for those things when it was really the lack of character in the other person. Y'all dig what I'm saying? And I did this so much so to where I remember there's this scene to where I was having this problem with this young man to where I kept apologizing over and over for the mistakes that they were making. This guy was making the mistakes and repeating offenses over and over to where it was getting overwhelmingly frustrating for me. But I kept feeling like, well, I need to take responsibility. And I kept saying things like, well, I should have made this more clear. And, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't convey this correctly, but it needed to be done this way. And like over and over and over. And there's a point where this guy said, well, I'm just tired of you having to apologize all the time. I just want it to get better. And his whole direction was that he's frustrated at me for being the one who, for it always being my fault, that I just can't get it right. And I remember just feeling like a little ticked off and reserved and thinking like, who the heck does this guy think he is? And all this time that I was trying to take responsibility, I portrayed myself as the one that kept being the one that's making mistakes. He never got this, in a sense, opportunity to own up to his mistakes. So he never corrected the course. And now I've painted myself as the person that can't stop making mistakes. And inevitably, I ended up seeming like the person in the wrong, even though I was trying to be extra nice and taking the blame over and over. I ended up looking bad, and I ended up coming across as a weak leader. Today's episode is brought to you by Gravetop Designs online store. Visit gravetopdesigns.com/shop to find custom-made Christian clothing that's edgy and actually looks good. I crafted all of the designs myself, so I'd love to hear your feedback and tell me what you think. Share your next purchase on Instagram and tag Gravetop Designs for a chance to get 10% off your next order. Shop today, help support this channel. Again, that's gravetopdesigns.com/shop. And I want us to focus on this idea for a minute, because this boils down to being a real person. When you're always positioning yourself as a leader that's just constantly apologizing for things that aren't even your fault, you unintentionally portray yourself as either an insecure or an ingenuine leader, and both of which come across as being a weak leader. And when I say weak, I'm not talking about muscles. I'm talking about the sense of a leader that can hold the weight of responsibility for others to stand on. I mean, like a leader holds the weight of their staff. And when you're just constantly apologizing, again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't apologize, but I find that we either, when it comes to apologizing, that we often make this mistake of over apologizing, and it makes us seem insecure to our staff, insecure to those who are trusting us, and in the sense that we seem like we're never getting it right. And like, I'm sorry, I just didn't know. And it seems like we're these ignorant leaders that are just making mistakes. Or for those who can read in between the lines, we can come across as an ingenuine leader, meaning that we say that we apologize, but we shuck it off like it's not even a big deal. Like we just go through the motions of apology. And I made that mistake plenty of times too, to where I would just apologize and like, all right, I'll just take the blame and apologize. But I didn't even mean it. I didn't mean the apology when I would give it, and it comes across as ingenuine. And both of which end up making you seem like a weak leader who has poor character. And when you seem like a weak leader, the best people on your team will eventually leave to find a stronger leader. And again, I'm talking about the idea of confidence, this confident leader that owns up to their mistakes genuinely and helps bring accountability to those who make mistakes on the team. See, apologize for the things within your control, the things that were genuinely, you realize that I should have done better at this, I should have kept a better eye on this. Apologize for those things in a way that moves forward, not as like, I'm so sorry I hurt all y'all's feelings by not holding this. Like, again, I'm just saying, be genuine about it. You don't have to be overly empathetic. Just be real and build morale and better preparedness for the things that were outside of your control. If it was a technical issue that was really outside of your control, you don't have to apologize for that, but you could build morale and better preparedness where like, okay, guys, well, even though this was no one's fault, we're going to do better at preparing next time, and we're going to double check all of our equipment. And when it comes to the people within your team that are making that make a mistake or fall short on a goal, you need to bring accountability and structure to them in order to strengthen them. And when you help strengthen those who've made a mistake, again, everyone makes a mistake. But when you bring accountability to that, it gives a greater confidence to the other people within your team. And I'll compare it even like to if you've ever done a diet on your own and fell short, like the beginning, it's about to be New Year's. A lot of people are going to start a diet and be done with that diet by the end of the month. And then it's not going to be a lifestyle change. But there's a few that will start this new diet and they'll carry it on to the next 3 months, 6 months, even though it might be a whole lifestyle change. And it's those who end up most likely did it with a group, and they have a group that they're accountable with, that they're all doing the diet together. And this sense of accountability strengthened their own character. And similar to a workplace, similar to our teams, when we give accountability for our actions and to mistakes and the need for things to be addressed, rather than just, in a sense, deflecting the blame by apologizing for it yourself, even though it wasn't within your grasp, you help strengthen your team to better trust each other, to better work together, and to grow stronger within the direction and vision of your ministry organization. Y'all dig what I'm saying? It really, at the end of the day, you got to be real. You got to take a responsibility for the things within your control, but you don't need to be accepting the blame for the things that aren't in your control. You don't have to apologize for everything. Apologize and be genuine for the things that are real, but don't just be pretending these apologies. Y'all feel me? Let's end with 3 takeaways. Number 1, do an internal assessment of yourself and how you handle the direction for your ministry and organization. Do you blame your staff? Do you blame your consumers, or do you blame yourself for where you're currently at? And what can you do to fix this course? As a little side extra credit thing, especially within churches, you'll hear this saying like, well, our people don't volunteer. See, that is what I'm talking about when you blame your consumers. That is shucking off responsibility. That is something that you can take responsibility for and help better lead your culture to be a culture that volunteers. So who is it that you're blaming? Recognize it, correct the course, take responsibility. Number 2, assess your type of apology behavior. Do you own up to your mistakes? Do you take the blame for others, or do you deflect blame to chaos altogether? You say, oh, well, that just happens. It was no one could have done anything. Does no one ever take blame? Adjust your behavior to be both reasonable and responsible when it comes to apology behavior. And number 3, Practice being a real person who leads. Be intentional about building morale in the midst of mistakes. Practice addressing people who have been slacking and encourage others who have been grinding. All that being said, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. I hope that made a difference in your life. I hope that was edifying to your leadership. Can you do me a favor? Can you leave a rating and review for this podcast? It'd really help me out and help others to see the show. Until next time, have a great life.